Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Pendulum from Stonemaier Games. Pendulum is a 1 to 5 player real-time game, a real-time tableau building empire kind of civ abstracted game. There's a lot going on here, and there is a real-time mode to it, as well as solo mode, all that other stuff. General idea of the game is you're going to be placing out workers in this game. This is a worker placement game where you're going to be gathering your workers and placing them onto different zones. And the key thing in this game is you cannot ever, there's basically 2 rules you need to remember. You can never ever move workers from wherever a timer is, and you can only take actions from where a timer is. That's the basic idea. So what you want to do in the game is you're constantly mindful of the fact that you're going to be flipping timers as the game goes. You're going to be grabbing a timer over here and flipping it down, taking actions while the timer is active in that row. You can never move workers, so this worker cannot actually move on there. I can go ahead and move a worker down there in order to take advantage of the fact that this row is now clear from those workers, and then eventually when the timer does flip, you have to actually wait for it to end, I can then go ahead and move this worker somewhere else on the board to any row where a timer is not. In general, in the game, the rows you're going to see over here, they have the same basic arc going on, so these are the same as these are the same as these, and these are the same as these, effectively ensuring that you always have a place to place and or move workers, but you're constantly trying to be mindful as you place your workers out in different ways to take actions with that real-time system. It's a real-time game. You have to be mindful of the fact that the timers are slowly flipping down, and eventually the timers are going to eventually run out, flip down, running out of time in this game as you're trying to place your workers into those various zones to get what you need. That's a lot of kind of confusing jargon going on. The basic idea is it's worker placement. That's the first idea. It's worker placement with real time. Those timers are the real time element, and you have to be mindful of the fact that you can only take actions where the timers are actively are. Once you flip a timer, you can go ahead and move people away from that, because you can only move workers where the timers aren't. That's the core idea. As far as what you're actually doing in this game, you're trying to get these tracks. Each player is going to have their own little tracks here. You're trying to get these all the way to the end, ideally, well, all of your markers, all 4 of them to the end. The key one you want to be paying attention to, though, is this, because if there's ever a tie, whoever has this over here, this little achievement marker, which they'll get from this tile over here, that's going to define a kind of a critical game element that you need, although if no one got that, then there's a tiebreaker from there as well. So you're trying to move these timers, which is where the game comes into this very abstracted resource gathering game. You see, everything you do in the game comes down to gathering resources. You're going to go over here, and you'll pay 2 money to go ahead and move up 2 on that yellow sun track over here, moving them over here. You're going to take workers and place them down over here in order to spend 4 military might, and then go ahead and take one of these cards, which will go into your board, and you'll slot them into your board in some particular area, where you'll go ahead, let's see if we can gather over here, we'll pop that down over here, and you'll go ahead and get the various bonuses, increasing what you get from those various tableau areas. So you're trying to get a degree of empire conquering from this little pile of cards over here, and then players have the opportunity to go ahead and flip these down, putting them out on the board. You have a degree of trying to gather those extra resource cubes you'll need, to getting extra votes you need, to triggering the various rewards of those zones. So for example, if I go over here, I'll trigger all my yellow rewards, but again, you have to be mindful of the fact that there's a timer constantly ticking down, and you have to try to take advantage of the various zones you're going to need as you go through that. So again, you're basically trying to gather resources, placing people down, trigger the various bonuses on your personal tableau over here, trigger the various bonuses that you're slowly building out as you gather more empire areas, put them there. You're trying to be mindful of the ways you're going to actually move up the yellow, blue, and red areas. So you'll see some of those symbols over here. We have some red, we have some yellow, we have some blue over here, and there's other ways you can get it from some of these cards over here. And then over here we have the military parade, which is this little event card that's going to be out every round, where if you have 4 military might, 4 coins, and 3 votes, and this will vary based on the card, you have the opportunity to go ahead and either take the bottom, in this case a red and yellow advancement, or take this, which is an essential component to win the game. The problem is every round only one player can actually get that, so you are trying to race to get that, hoping to actually gather that because you'll need it for that victory condition as you go through the game. There's a few other elements going on, but that's the basic idea of this. It is worker placement with real time. That's the core idea of Pendulum. It is worker placement with real time. You are placing workers down. There's ways to get more workers. These are the council phase over here. You're going to get various rewards you can gather in these areas over here. Some of those will give you those extra workers, extra actions, extra economy, extra trading in tokens for things. You'll have a variety of stuff coming from the council phase. Past that, the bulk of the game will happen over here as you're trying to place down these timers in different areas, move people around the board, and take actions, with every player at the table going ahead and taking advantage of those timers. Everyone has the opportunity to flip them, and you don't need to flip them as soon as they are ready to flip. And that is basically what is going on in Pendulum, which brings me to our review, starting off with ease of play. This is not that complicated of a game. There's two real elements going on. There's a basic worker placement tableau building engine going on, and then there's the timer mechanism. And if you divide those two into two separate things to be mindful of, it's a fairly procedural game as far as what you have to learn here. It's worker placement. You paste down a worker, you take the benefits. You're building up your engine, you have currencies in play, you have to be mindful of spending those currencies. You're trying to build up your empire as fast as possible so you can get more stuff. Every time you trigger one of these zones over here, if the more stuff you've gathered because of these empire cards, the more of a chain of resources you'll gather in. A few other elements, the council phase is going to be a hand of cards, a few other small elements you need to be mindful of, but basically it's worker placement with a degree of tableau building in the game. Then you throw in the time mechanism, and that's where the game gets a little bit complicated, not so much in the complexity of the game itself, but rather in the complexity of playing the game. I would say when you're playing Pendulum, the actual rules are not that hard, but the playing of the game is where things get a little messy, and we'll talk about that later in this review. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with the fact that I like the tableau building here. This does give you simple, quick worker placement tableau building. All of those things are things that I enjoy. I enjoy worker placement. I enjoy this aspect of the empires over here that you're slowly building up. I enjoy the asymmetric characters in the game. The game does come with asymmetric characters, not huge degrees of asymmetry, but enough there to give you something else to focus on. And I like the powers that they give you. I like the cards that you're vying for in the council phase. This just gives you a very simple, very to-the-point worker placement tableau game, and I like all that stuff. And it is distilled down to the bare bone mechanisms as far as just, it's very abstracted, which is a pro and a con, but it's distilled down to those bare bone mechanisms, and then it comes in with that twist of the timers, although that's where we start moving very quickly to the things I don't like in Pendulum. You see, the problem with the timer mechanism is that I find that the timer mechanism is an interesting, clever, not necessarily clever, it's an interesting twist to a worker placement tableau building game, and it makes it different, it makes it stand out. This game was very much talked about a lot when it came out, and it certainly is something, well, different. The downside of that is not so much in the real-time element in of itself. I don't really mind the real-time element by itself. What I do mind is the fact that it makes this game almost impossible to play unless you're playing it with the same dedicated group again and again and again. I find your first game or two of Pendulum is a mess of people just reaching for various timers, having the players who know what's happening interrupt the players who don't know what's happening, correcting them on those rules, because the rules aren't that complicated, but every rule is more complicated when you're doing so in real time. Everything that you thought you learned is suddenly, okay, so I can take actions with the workers when they're at the timers, and I can't move the workers to or from where the timers are. Got it. That's a very simple idea to learn. When you're trying to implement that into your first game, you will fall apart very quickly. The game specifically recommends having a few rounds first not timed so players can get that flow up and running. I find that's not enough. I find that you need a round or two not timed, and then you need half a game to a full game of actual timed play for somebody to really get the sense of the timing of the game, pun semi-intended. And so that's really my issue here with this one. It's not so much that I mind real-time in the game itself, it's that I find the mechanisms and the way they work tend to lend itself to messy play unless you're playing with people who know what's happening, so I think this game only really works with people who are regularly going to table it because of the inevitable mistakes. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, real-time. The real-time madness and frenzy doesn't necessarily bother me in the pressure it adds here, but if you don't like the real-time madness and frenzy, that's definitely going to be a factor, meaning I mind it because of the inevitable rules mistakes and how I've yet to have a clean game of Pendulum, but if you don't like just the general sense of pressure, that's another reason to be frustrated with real-time. And then secondly, it feels very abstracted. That doesn't really bother me in the game, but this game certainly does feel very abstracted as far as what the game is trying to do. It's just distilled down to a bunch of resource collection with the barest hint of theme actually behind it. It's abstracted worker placement tableau building with real-time thrown in. As far as final thoughts on Pendulum, this is a hard one for me to give a rating to because it's hard one for me to give a rating to because I appreciate what the game is doing, and there are elements of Pendulum that are actually compelling. Instinctively, I kind of want to give it a 3.5 because I think this game is fun, but in practice, I do have to recognize the fact that I don't really have the desire to table this one again. I don't have the desire to table Pendulum again because ultimately, the mechanisms and the way they combine have not resulted in play that I have found satisfying when I've tabled this, not because of the game itself, but because of the necessity to pick it up and learn it at the table. I am going to reluctantly give this one a 2.5 out of 5, although with the caveat that the gameplay itself, I think, actually is much higher than that. I think there's a 3.5 out of 5, a solid game, it's great. The problem is the way everything intermingles, it has left me with a lack of desire to table it, not because of where I want it to be, but because of where, practically speaking, it is. So a very reluctant but unfortunate 2.5 out of 5 in this one. I think it has a lot of promise, and it might work for your group. If you're tabling this a lot, I think there's a different conversation. If you are the kind kind of group that's going to table the same games with the same people, I think this may well work for you. In the case of where it currently stands, it's not one I'm eager to table again. As far as the other game recommendations, first of all, if you want something with real-time that's more cooperative based, which inherently takes away some of that problem I mentioned, well, Kitchen Rush. Kitchen Rush is going to give you, and Rush MD as well, those are two from the same publisher, two similar but different games of cooperative, real-time elements at play, with timers, with all that, with the chaos, but because they are cooperative, there's less of an inherent issue at play as you introduce new players to the game. And then if you're looking for something that gives you some of the most rewarding, quick tableau building I've seen, Aquatica. I am a huge fan of Aquatica, really enjoy that one. It removes any sense of timers or real time or pressure or madness, and it just gives you solid, enjoyable tableau building. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.